Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the time scheduled for a technical conference and docket number 22-057-03, Dominion Energy Utah's application to increase distribution rates and charges and make tariff modifications. My name is Jacob Richardson, and I'm the PSC's facilitator for this conference. And next, we'll have everyone start introducing yourselves. Start on the side of the room.
Cynthia Party.
Okay, and who are you with?
I'm with Kelly. So
Dominion. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Tyson, Dominion.
Jessica Ibsen, Dominion Energy.
Jennifer Clark, also with Dominion Energy.
Austin Stewart, Dominion Energy.
Dave Landward with Dominion Energy.
Yvonne Hochul, Public Service Commission.
John Harvey, Public Service Commission.
John Delaney, Public Service Commission.
Ryan Nagel, the division.
Patrick Griecu, Assistant Attorney General representing the division.
Tammy Davey with the Division of Public Utilities.
Dave Clark with Public Service Commission.
Doug Wheelwright with the division.
Jeff Einfeld with the division.
Thad LeVar with the PSC.
Austin Summers with Dominion.
Allison Anderson, the Office of Consumer Services.
Alex Ware with the office.
Michelle Beck, Office.
Sophie Hayes with Western Resource Advocates.
Philip Russell with the Utah Association of Energy Users.
Neil Townsend with the Utah Association of Energy Users.
Kelly Mendenhall with Dominion Energy.
Okay, that's everyone in the office. Or is anyone on the phone joining us?
Guess that's a no.
Some of our staff.
You're being asked to unmute yourself. To unmute, press *6. You're being asked to unmute yourself. To unmute, press *6. You're being asked to unmute yourself.
Do it.
To unmute, press *6.
Good morning, this is Laura Baker on behalf of Nucor Steel.
Is there anyone else joining us on the line? Okay, well, we will now turn the time over to Dan.
All right, great, thanks.
So, why are we here? I don't mean that in like the cosmic sense, like why are we here for this technical conference? There's actually two follow-ups from the rate case order. One relates to the CET, and then one relates to some cost of service revenue comparisons. So I'm going to cover the CET, and Austin will cover the cost of service stuff. So with respect to the CET, there were a lot of parties that mentioned or that talked about potentially reevaluating the CET, which stands for Conservation Enabling Tariff. And so really the purpose of this meeting is to kind of develop the framework of what you want us to present in the next rate case. So I'm going to talk a lot about what was in the last case. We'll just provide an overview. We assume that anything that was in the last case we will include in the upcoming case. But this is really your chance. If there's other things that you want us to evaluate, other data that you want to see, and we've got a lot of data, let's talk about it. This is your chance to kind of
Good morning, I apologize. This is Laura Baker. I cannot hear you on the phone. I am listening on the live stream, but there is a delay. And so if you're asking for questions at any point, I would just ask that you either unmute the line or allow for the delay from the live stream, please. I apologize for interrupting. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be asking for any questions unless now I'm getting some feedback from myself.
Yes, we'll also ask that those listening on the line to mute yourselves when listening.
Sorry. Hopefully that's...
I can hear you on the line now, but there is a bad echo. I'm fine with using the live stream, but just if you can give me time to respond. I apologize.
Sure. I don't anticipate that I will be asking any questions, but if you have a comment, feel free to jump in and we can go back if we need to.
I couldn't understand you. I apologize.
We will give pauses when I ask questions so that you may respond. Okay. So I know a lot of you probably weren't here when this was all conceived, so I want to just start off with a little bit of background and just set kind of some foundational discussion. So before we get into the evaluation, so this the CET actually it all starts back in 2002. We had a general rate case, and in that case, the commission ordered a group to create a task force to talk about alternative rate making options. And so full decoupling was one of those options. I'm going to talk a lot about that in a moment. But just to give you an idea of some of the other options, you have straight fixed variable. And straight fixed variable is basically where you would charge a customer a large basic service fee every month to kind of cover all of the non-gas costs, and then really no volumetric charge. We talked about lost revenue, where that's where you actually try to quantify how much usage is being reduced by energy efficiency measures. And you quantify that lost revenue, and the company is able to collect that lost revenue from customers through a surcharge. And then we had full decoupling. So the parties kind of looked at all those different options. In 2005, made a filing. There was a lot of testimony. But went back and kind of reviewed some of it. Ultimately, the parties were able to come up with a settlement, a compromise, where they agreed that we would try out full decoupling for 3 years, and it would be a 3-year pilot program. In every year, the company would come back in and kind of take a look and see how things were going. So that was approved in 2006. The next year, in 2007, came in, did a review of year one. Things looked okay. Agreed we'll continue. In 2007, which you don't see on here, we had a rate case, so that would have been the year 2 review. And in that case, the company, I think, proposed to continue it. There really wasn't a lot of discussion, and so we continued on. And then in 2009, there were a couple of filings to extend it to 2010, well, to 2009, and then again to 2010. And then in 2009, we had another general rate case where the parties agreed that going forward, the CET would be would no longer be a pilot program. We would just continue on. So, and this is the commission order from the original docket in 2006, finding that the settlement was in the public interest. We'll give it a go and we'll see how it goes. So we've actually, the CET has been in effect since 2006. 17 years, it's a long time. I know because I started in this department in 2006, and it has been a long time. So, actually, before I move on, I do want to thank Tyson and Austin and Jordan Parks. They helped put these slides together. So, a lot of work went into these slides, so I just appreciate their effort and want to point that out. Okay, so here's a very simple example of revenue decoupling. So let's say we go in for a general rate case, and like I said, this is very simple, but you have 10 customers. Each customer uses 10 decatherms, and at that point, in the point of the rate case, you decide, you know what, our revenue requirement for these 10 customers is $100. So what we would do then is say, okay, to calculate an allowed revenue per customer, you would take the $100, you divide it by 10 customers, and you'd say, I need to receive $10 per customer to cover all of my non-gas costs. And then at the same time, you would calculate a rate for those customers, and you would say, okay, if these customers each use 10 decatherms, my rate would be $1 per decatherm. So right now, everything's coupled, right? I'm collecting the same amount from my allowed revenue, and the thought is, and this was hit on a lot in the original docket, you're now collecting revenue on a salary basis instead of a commission basis. So you don't care how much a customer uses, you're just getting paid what you need per customer to cover your costs. And we'll talk about why that's important. But at the time of when rates are set, everything's coupled. I'm collecting the same amount on a allowed revenue basis as I am on a volumetric basis. And then what's going to happen is, as time goes on, this usage per customer is going to change. It could go up, it can go down, and I'm going to become decoupled. And so I'm going to be allowed to collect my revenue based on my allowed revenue per customer or my salary, and I'm going to let this float. I'm going to continue to charge customers on a volumetric basis, and then I'm just going to true things up as time goes along. So that's the first step. So let's talk about what would cause changes in usage. So the first, energy efficiency, and that's really probably the main driver of why we have revenue decoupling, is because we wanted to incent the company to encourage energy efficiency, to encourage customers to use less of their product, which is insane if you're a business. But in this case, it makes sense. And as customers use less, their usage per customer is going to go down, and so that decoupling mechanism helps to take into account any decreases in usage. Weather. So we have a weather normalization adjustment, and so you may say, well, why do you need, CET doesn't help you with weather because the weather normalization adjustment takes care of that. But the weather normalization adjustment is really good, but it's not perfect. And let me give you a couple examples. So one is the weather normalization adjustment assumes that your usage is linear, meaning for every degree that drops, your usage per customer, or your energy usage also drops that same amount. But that, we know in reality that's not the case. For example, if it's 60 degrees outside or 50 degrees outside and the temperature drops 1 degree, your furnace is not going to need to use as much energy as if it's 20 degrees outside and it drops by 1 degree to 19 degrees. So your usage customers' usage is really not linear. So that's the one issue. Another issue is because weather normalization is done kind of on a monthly basis, wide variability in weather could cause some noise in the weather normalization adjustment. So for example, let's say it's the month of April, and all the month of April, the average temperature is 65 degrees. So if with the exception of 3 days. So if it's 65 degrees, your weather normalized degree days on those days are going to be 0. But if it drops down to, let's say, 35 degrees for 3 or 4 days, your appliances are going to turn on, you're going to be using them, but on the average, it's going to be skewed a little bit. It's not going to be a perfect calculation. So in instances where your weather normalization adjustment isn't perfectly calculating the impact on weather, the CET, or full decoupling, can help to capture those changes as well. Am I missing anything, Dave?
No,
Dave's the expert on this.
Sounds good.
Okay. So far, so good.
Wait, before you move on,
Yeah.
are there other ways of doing weather normalization? So, I mean, do utilities have weather normalization, for example, that is not linear?
There's a wide array of regression techniques that can be used to capture that nonlinear behavior. This weather normalization is actually being done by the billing system, customer by customer. It's just not sophisticated enough to program some kind of a polynomial regression for each individual customer to capture those tail regions where it might not be linear, a little more exponential. There's a wide range where it is pretty linear and it works nicely. You get into some of those bizarre areas on the tails where it gets a little tricky. So on an aggregate level, yes, customer by customer for a simple algorithm and a billing system, not really.
Okay, so, but still, I guess, let me re-ask one element of that question. Do you know whether other gas utilities are using nonlinear methods of weather normalization?
For weather normalization for revenue adjustment, I'm not aware of, well, let me say I'm not aware of companies that are using more sophisticated nonlinear regression. They may be if they're doing everything at an aggregate level, adjustments after the fact for revenue accounting.
Okay, I mean, I just think that if we're really going to explore the continuation of the CET, it would be worthy of additional
Find out.
yeah, additional exploration of weather normalization.
Sure.
You know, is there a way to modify that to
Yeah.
capture some of the biggest concerns?
I mean, I will tell you, I think, in talking with other utilities, I actually think our weather normalization is pretty sophisticated because like Dave said, it's done at the billing, at the customer level. A lot of them do it more just kind of a peanut butter spread. They calculate it for the whole customer base and just make an adjustment.
So I,
So,
well,
yeah,
I for
that's
one would
something-
like to learn
that's
more
something
about
we can
that.
evaluate.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would really appreciate
Sure.
being able to learn more about that. I feel like you know, when I think about it, I haven't ever dug in on that. I don't really understand the details.
So we can add a deeper dive in that
That would
as
be
part of the
helpful.
evaluation.
Yeah, thank you.
John, you had a comment?
Just a question, so I understand an earlier statement you made. And it seemed logical to me, you said that a degree changing at 50 is very different than a degree changing at 20. But you do the computer system does the billing on a monthly basis, so I'm assuming you're looking at a monthly average temperature.
Right.
So my question is then, if you have a month where the temperature is pretty tight, versus a month where you have a lot of variability, so you're getting into those tills, is that where the problem comes from? Is that type of variability? Even though you could have the same average temperature, you would have a different amount of gas being used if there's a greater variability?
I think the greater variability is a bigger issue, but I'm gonna defer to Dave, because he's the subject matter expert.
The billing system is taking heating degree days day by day throughout every customer's unique billing period, and then summing those up. Taking the full gas volume measurement.
Okay, so it's not an average temperature, it's a heating degree day.
Right,
Okay,
heating degree
okay.
days.
For that specific customer,
Right.
for their billing period.
Okay, that makes sense, thanks.
Okay.
And then it does get a little messy, because you have 19 billing cycles, so everybody's on a different, 30-day window you're looking at, so yeah, it does get a little complicated, yeah.
The question before we move on from this, and so our expert witness in the rate case, when talking about the CET, presented the graph from before the CET was implemented. And he showed that there was a 36% usage decrease between that time period. And since the CET, that's flattened out. So that's kind of the main issue that he brought up. But the question that I have is, for that 36%, what was the main driver of those cost reductions over that time period that led to the CET being asked for? And so the question is, of all these things, is there a proportion that you can point to and say that was the cause? Was it that the appliances were getting so much better, or why is it that people were using so much less over time?
Yeah, and that is a very difficult question to answer. But I think it's all of the above. So I mean, I don't know if that's even something that we could quantify. Breaking out usage changes based on each of these items. Can you think of a way to do that?
I think it'd be difficult to separate, because you have a lot of variables working in tandem. You had periods of high spikes in price. Gas consumption in a microeconomics context is an inelastic commodity, but there is a significant consumer demand to
There's a long-term elasticity.
and so there were periods of back in remember the Enron issue back in the early 2000s. There were huge spikes, and that did motivate customers to change their behavior. There's, there was a building surge with population growth where new housing stock was a lot more efficient than the old housing stock, better insulation. A lot of this, of course, being incented by the energy efficiency programs, better furnaces, high efficiency, better windows, better roofing. So as the proportion of more efficient housing stock started to grow relative to the full population, then you see average usage for heating the same amount of heating space going down. So you've got price, you've got housing stock improvements. Just a lot of variables working together. To try and separate those out is tricky.
I mean, what we can provide the data, and say this is what normal weather looked like, this is what actual weather was, this is what the energy efficiency measures were, this is what the price the customers were paying. We can provide all of that so you can look at it, but to try and quantify, okay, this it went down one degree or 1 decatherm per customer, and it's 50% of it is this, 50% of that's pretty tough to figure out.
Because it would be great to know the root causes to be able to really fully understand the issue. But even, I suppose, without that, what our expert witness is saying is that if you have a 36% decline in usage on average per customer over this period of time, and since the CET, we're now at a decline rate of since the CET was implemented to now, I think he said it was like 0.9%.
Yeah, I've got those slides if you want to wait until we get to that point.
Sure. So I guess my point is, I'd love to know the root causes and see if those issues are still, present, but without knowing exactly what they are, I guess what our expert witness is trying to indicate is maybe those same challenges that were being faced before are not being faced now, but I guess we'll see if perhaps you have additional information to provide. So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah. Price, we talked a little bit about that, and there is a chart, and that was kind of one of the things we used to address your witness, was price. So obviously there is some price elasticity when it comes to
You're unmuted.
When it comes to customer usage, and the interesting thing that we've seen and that Dave's seen is sometimes there's a lag on that, especially with a customer who's on budget billing. They may not feel the effects of a price increase until their budget bill gets updated in the summer. So that there's kind of a lag there. But that definitely has an impact on usage and then forecasting differences. So, we forecast every rate case. It's a fully forecasted test period. And honestly, whether you were using a historical test period or a fully forecasted test period, your billing determinants are a forecast because you're trying to figure out what customers are going to be using. And if we were all to go back and look at our usage for the last 5 years, everyone's usage, even if you were able to fully take out the weather, it would be different because, people's lives change over time. People move in and out, and they get new appliances, and so there's all sorts of things that can change forecasting differences. So that's another thing that could cause usage to be higher or lower from where they are when the billing determinants are set. So let's go back to the example. So let's look at a declining usage situation and look at how the revenue decoupling mechanism would work. So once again, very simple. Let's say everybody, remember they were all using 10 decatherms. We're now a year later. Now they're all using 9 decatherms. I'm still collecting $100 because I've got a $10 per customer revenue amount, allowed revenue, but now I'm only collecting $90 in volumetric revenue. So that results in a $10 under collection. And the way that the revenue decoupling works is I would take that $10, I would divide it by 90 decatherms, and I would collect an additional 11 cents per decatherm from these customers over the next year to take care of that under collection. Now let's look at an increasing usage situation. So once again, I set my billing determinants assuming everybody was using 10, they're all using 11. I'm still allowed $100. My volumetric revenue is 110, so I've actually over collected $10. So this negative denotes an over collection, and in this situation, I would give back $10 to customers by giving them a 9-cent credit on their bill over the next year. So that's kind of how the mechanism works. So let's look and see how this has looked over the last year, and I think this may be surprising to some people. So once again, negative denotes over collection, positive denotes under collection. You can see it's gone both ways, but net over time, we've actually had 12 years of over collection and 5 years of under collection, and the net amount actually that needs to be given back to customers is $20 million. Which is probably surprising because I think most people figured the CET is only going to benefit the company most of the time, and most of the time you're going to be collecting additional money because it's a decreasing usage all the time. But that has not been the case. In fact, some return on equity witnesses like to argue that the return on equity needs to be reduced because it decreases the company's risk. But if you actually want to quantify an adjustment to return equity, you could take 20 million divided by 17, that's $1.2 million in the customer's favor, and you could increase the return equity by 7 basis points. Do you have a comment?
No.
Okay. So anyway, that's just kind of where we're at, and in the next case, we'll provide this information again, updated through, the time of filing. Okay, so this gets to what Alex was talking about. So, witness Daniel from the OCS argued, we need to reevaluate because maybe we don't need the CET anymore. Maybe this declining usage that was a problem is no longer. And these are the charts you were talking about, right?
Right.
So you can see we had a big drop. This chart on the left is from December 80 through December 05. Yeah, December 05. Really steep drop. And I think when we were originally making the case, the argument was, this is all due to improved building measures and more efficient appliances. And if you want us to encourage customers to, use less natural gas and to put in more efficient appliances, we've got to do something about this. And as you can see, this is still a decrease. The trend is still a decrease, but it is not as steep as it used to be. So, this really touches right on your question, Alex. Like, why? Why is this now not as steep? And going back to Daniel's argument, well, maybe we don't need this anymore because the decline seems manageable. So one thing that we noted is we were kind of looking through the data, and I will point out this is just through July 21, so it doesn't have the information for the last basically 2 years, but this is what we put in the rate case. You can see the prices were consistently on a downtrend. Now, if you were to continue this out, this would go back up to about where it was back in 2006. But we think part of the reason why that curve has flattened out a little bit is because customers were paying less and less and less for their bill, and so they were able to afford a little bit more. And so I think everyone would agree energy efficiency is going to cause your usage per customer to drop, but we think it may have been muted a little bit by this decrease in price. Now, can I quantify that amount? I don't think I can. But I do think, just from a simple, theoretical perspective, it makes sense. That is, your bill decreases, your usage will probably increase over time. Just over the long term, you're going to be more comfortable, or you're going to be able to pay more and have more comfort using natural gas. So that was kind of our discussion there. We'll add this, like I said, I do think it's probably a good thing to include in the evaluation. In addition to weather normalization, a discussion on price, what price has done since the inception of the CET, We can talk about anything else, any other data people want to see.
Also, maybe your view of just a qualitative discussion of the differing trends.
Yeah.
I understand that piecing that out and attributing it to variables is
Yeah.
not going to be possible.
Yeah, but provide what data we can to kind of.
Yeah, and then just a description of like what you just said, maybe just so that people who weren't around, who weren't doing this,
Right.
can kind of understand
Yeah.
how the circumstances were different.
Sure. Linda.
I was curious that, does this include both residential and industrial customers together? And if you separate the two, is there a difference in the trends?
So this is just residential, I believe, isn't it, Dave? But yeah, that should probably be a part of the discussion, because included in the GS class are larger commercial customers, and it would be, I would agree, that would be something we would want to include as well. Any other questions? Okay. So, I think Mr. Daniel does correctly identify this was this was one of the issues that we cited for energy, for the reason why we needed decoupling. There was one other major reason I touched on at the beginning, and this is from Artie Powell's testimony. So, in addition to the declining usage per customer, we really wanted to remove the barrier to incent Questar at that time, now Dominion, to encourage energy efficiency. So I guess the other question that I think needs to be evaluated is that worked? Has Dominion done what they said they would do, which is encourage energy efficiency? And I want to start by just looking across the country, and then we'll dive down into actually Dominion. But at the time this got approved, there were 4 other jurisdictions that had some kind of decoupling. I think 3 had full decoupling and 1 had partial decoupling. And so we were kind of on the forefront. We were trying to get decoupling. It was a new thought, a new thought, and a new mechanism. That was the word I was looking for. So that's what it looked like in 2005. And if you look now, decoupling is kind of caught on across the country. Well, most of the country. So I think if you count, maybe there's 8 or 9 states that don't have some kind of decoupling, but most states have embraced some sort of revenue decoupling, whether it's a partial decoupling or full decoupling. It's much more commonplace than it was. And I think you can see this is a chart that shows the energy efficiency spending for natural gas utilities from 2007 to 2020. You can see that spending in those programs has also increased. So I do think there's a correlation between utilities receiving some kind of decoupling and having them be more willing to incent energy efficiency.
Kelly,
yeah.
The map was addressing just natural gas.
I think this
You
is
said utilities, so I'm just wondering.
I think this is all. This is all, right? It's
Electric?
gas and electric, yeah.
Ah.
So if any utility or if any state had any kind of decoupling for either gas or electric, we included it. But if it's useful, we can narrow this down to gas only.
Yeah. I'd encourage you to do that.
Okay, we'll do that.
Show the electric one too if you want.
Okay.
You dare.
Yeah, no, we can totally do that. We've got the data to do it. So. Okay, so let's look at our programs. So there's a lot of years, so I grouped them, but you can see over the life of the program, 17 years, annual savings is about 13 million decatherms. Now, if you're like, well, is that good? Is that bad? How much is 13 million decatherms? Our system, general sales customers is about 114 million decatherms in Utah and Wyoming. So that's about 10% of the total usage on our system for that class.
Oh yeah, but that's cumulative, right?
No, this is cumulative.
Oh, okay, got it. Thanks.
So yeah, so cumulative will be 251. Well, that's lifetime.
Yeah,
So-
but that's cumulative annual, right?
Right. Well, so yeah, so if this would be if I signed up for I'll give you a perfect example. I just got a brand new dual fuel heat pump with a backup furnace. This would be how much my annual savings would be. I don't think it's cumulative though. I think this is, so if I got the rebate here, they're counting this is how much you got.
Sorry, Kelly, was the 114 million decatherms, was that an annual number for usage
Yeah.
from the GS class? Okay.
Yep. Yes.
So in your reports that you give us, I think you talk about first year savings.
Right.
Versus lifetime. So if you could just confirm or provide, whichever it happens to be, the total of first year savings when you get around to the rate case.
Yeah, I think that's what this is. So I think this is your cumulative number. Is that what you're saying? You're thinking
Well,
this is
it'd be-
cumulative.
I don't, no, I think that the 13 million is a number that's hard to contextualize because it's cumulative of first year savings.
Right.
And then but the next column is looking at lifetime savings. And so I just want to make sure we're not sort of double counting or like measuring apples and oranges, like.
Right.
'cause
No, I think John's right.
I don't think
This is
13
first year
million.
savings.
Yeah, but I don't think 13 million is something you would compare against 114 million, because that's adding a bunch of one-year, first-year savings.
You'd add the-
Help me say that then.
You look at
How
one
do you
year to
calculate that
compare.
lifetime number?
I'm confused by that column, that middle column.
I need Mike Gordon here. So these are, this is right off of the report that we give you every year. John may be able to answer. He probably goes these meetings more than I do. But
Okay,
go ahead.
so your 114, you said was the yearly usage.
Yeah.
That would compare to just one of those numbers in the first column, and it wouldn't be the
Right.
total. It would
Yeah.
be, for 2022, if you had 114 in 2022, you'd compare the 949.
Right.
number.
Well, this would be first year savings, right?
Right.
Which number are you looking at? This one?
Right, and it's a one-year usage, and it's a one-year number. If you wanted to compare your, there really isn't anything you can compare the 13 to unless you just added up all the usage for those years.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You need to take
114
times 17
Right.
Yeah.
and
Assuming
compare
it
with
was
that.
constant,
Fair
yeah.
enough.
Yeah, so you're actually more like 0.5% probably.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So, number of rebates paid, 1.3 million. I think we've had 50% of our customers have participated in at least one rebate. But bottom line, as confusing as I've made these numbers and as little as I know how to explain them, I think the takeaway is that we have done our very best to try and encourage energy efficiency. And I'll give you an example. I just mentioned, I just put in a dual fuel heat pump. And by the way, if any of you are in the market, I've got a great contractor. It's not related to me, but Jen's used them, Dave's used them. They work a lot with Dominion, but they're really good. Anyway, that's off topic. But that dual fuel heat pump is supposed to reduce my gas usage by 50%. To my knowledge, we are the only utility in the country that offers an incentive to their customers to reduce their gas usage by 50%, while also I'm going to be increasing my electric usage. We would not be able to offer rebates like that if we didn't have decoupling, if we didn't have some kind of mechanism to make us whole.
I would argue you would not be able to offer that particular rebate
Right.
if it weren't explicitly authorized by legislation. So
Was that one authorized by legislation?
Pumps.
Were they? I thought we came in and got approval with the commission.
No, it was legislation.
It was legislated? Okay.
Because that's I don't want to take us off topic, but
Yeah.
I've worked on DSM in 2 different states, and fuel switching is a complicated question and hard to fit into standard regulatory paradigms.
Fair enough, but my understanding was that we did not do this because we were ordered by the legislature. We came to the
They
commission and
allowed
got
it.
approval.
They allowed it, and you came in and got approval.
Yeah.
And once it was allowed, how was anyone gonna challenge it? Just saying, I don't think that one is representative of the rest.
Okay, well, let's use some more then. We have a customer comparison report that I think we have evidence, and we're happy to include it in the next general rate case, that seeing how much you use compared to your neighbors actually impacts your behavior. That's another thing I don't think we would be rolling out without decoupling. So the bottom line is,
Can I give you an example in your favor?
Yeah.
I think another thing that is strong is prior to decoupling, Dominion was not involved in energy code training,
right.
and that I think is a strong contribution.
Thank you, Michelle.
Trying to be fair.
So anyway, I guess clearly I will do a better job of this in testimony in the rate case, but is there additional information that you want to see in the evaluation in terms of energy efficiency programs? Or do you feel like you have a pretty good feel for them? And I mean, I know we've got advisory group meetings every quarter. Is this lacking, or do people feel like, yeah, we got a pretty good handle on what your programs are? This really isn't the issue. Yeah.
I'm trying to think really hard how to
Just say it.
say this without causing any problem.
Just say it.
From a purely economic theory perspective, which is the stuff I care about.
Yeah.
The decoupling, the pros of the decoupling are exactly what you've talked about today. It removes these disincentives on the company's part. It allows new things to happen, et cetera, and that's pretty well both established and accepted, I think, in the economic literature. The thing that you haven't talked about, and that I think might be useful for that future testimony, is the concerns that are raised in that economic literature are what it does for the company's long-term incentives for its own costs of running its system. And if you go back to thinking about a rate case, traditional rate case structure, there's this automatic pressure to push rates down over time, because as you have a rate case, you set a race, the company then maximizes profits and it finds new efficiencies, not energy efficiencies, but operational efficiencies that are then visible in the next rate case. That all goes away under this, so maybe if you can talk about that as part of the...
Okay.
So you're talking about just general productivity improvements in the operations of the company are not they're not motivated.
They're no longer
under
incented
this,
in the same way.
Yeah, they're not incented in the same way. Yeah. So the truthfulness of that hypothesis would be an interest. Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, we could totally address
want
that.
to test that, I think.
For sure. Yeah, and I in reviewing the old testimony, that was brought up a few times. Yeah, that I think the way it was characterized mostly was it guarantees the company's ability to earn its allowed return or something like that. So yeah, that's something we can address for sure. Just following up on the effectiveness of our programs. Really, the way that you measure those is through the standardized cost effectiveness tests. I just put the last 5 years, but we've been pretty, anything above 1. So basically what this does is just takes the benefits and the costs and kind of compares them. Anything above 1 is considered good. Anything below 1 is considered net lacking. The RIM, the ratepayer impact measure test, rarely hits 1. It's really only focusing on, I think the RIM is focusing on the customers who are not participating in programs, but they're still paying for the energy efficiency program. So that one's a tough one to pass. But the other 3 have been pretty good. So not only are we offering a lot of incentives, but they're cost effective based on the measures of these tests.
So Kelly, can I make another suggestion?
Sure.
And on the just for information. The Rocky Mountain Power DSM steering group is doing a deeper dive into cost effectiveness tests for obviously other reasons.
Right.
And but I wonder if it wouldn't be also useful to and again, I know Mike's not here, but talk to him about scheduling a deeper dive into the tests so that we can, those of us who are working in both fields can kind of do some compare and contrast on how these, because the tests work a little differently, I think, with gas, because some of the, what my understanding, and I actually understand the electric side much better, is that some of the offsets, when you're looking at conservation, includes the commodity costs. So that's a little bit of a difference than when you're looking at generation costs on the electric side,
Right.
because of how much is a actual investment and how much is just market. So I feel like a little bit of a deeper dive on a parallel path over in DSM for the folks who are interested and working on that would dovetail nicely in terms of background going into the CET evaluation.
Okay.
If I could make that request.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question on the RIM. Going back a slide, but that's measuring effectively how much does it raise rates,
Yeah.
whether people participate or not, but we tend to focus on the people that aren't participating because the impact of them is greater. There's not an offset benefit.
Right.
So it's impressive to go from 0.76 to 0.96 over time, 17 to 22. I'm curious, is that being driven by that energy comparison because it's an incredibly low-cost program compared to giving rebates, but it pulls back a lot of benefits as you've increased the numbers of participants?
Yeah, I don't think that's included in here. I think what may be driving that is your reduction in purchase gas costs. That may be, that's my guess. Because
so with our last few months, that might completely...
in 2022, as you know, Wexpro is lower than the purchase gas costs, and so not having to go out and buy those in 2022 actually helped your weighted average cost of gas. I'm guessing that's it, but once again, we can get into that trend and what's causing it.
But you're warning me it might reverse given our price experience the last few
Yeah,
months.
well, and I also say, I mean, I've already clearly shown my ignorance in this subject, so I may be up here completely not knowing what I'm talking about. So,
Right, just for a future testimony, you can think a little bit about why that trend and what's happening.
yeah, totally. And I'll pass this on to Mike, and maybe we'll even have him talk about it in one of the advisory group meetings. And then this just shows administrative costs by state. We're fairly efficient in terms of how much we spend per dollar compared to our peers. So we're done with energy efficiency. I'm very happy. That's clearly my weak area here. So let's talk, one more thing that we talked about, or that was discussed from ANGC. And this is a pretty big word salad, so I'm just going to kind of explain. It's a valid argument, but let me just explain what he's saying here. So, if for example you have let's say my system, I just have two customers, one that provides $600, or one that costs $600 to serve, one that costs $200 to serve, and I go in and we calculate the average, and it's $400. And then I add a whole bunch of customers that are small, that only cost $200 to serve, but I'm getting $400 in revenue. That would create a big windfall for the company. I think that's the gist of what he's getting at here. So we discussed this in testimony, and it's a valid argument. I don't think for our system, or for the way that our CET, our revenue decoupling, is set up, I don't know that it's that big of an issue, and I'll tell you why. There's three reasons. So the big driver of what would cause this problem would be smaller units. And we definitely have seen more multifamily. If you're driving around Utah, you're noticing all new construction seems to be multifamily, huge multifamily units. And so these multifamily units are below average in size. And so they probably are contributing less than the average. And so that could cause issues. But you can see in terms of our total, we have 1.1 million customers. We add about 28,000 customers a year. In terms of total, it's not moving the needle very much. And so you can see this is a nice graphic that Dave put together that compares single-family, multifamily, and mobile homes. And you can see the multifamily dwelling, so this would be your apartments and your condos, and I'm assuming your townhomes, Dave, anything that's connected, right? Anything where you got more than one resident living, or more than one occupant in one building. It's growing to, about 0.4% per year, and it's expected to grow. And so if you didn't have rate cases very frequently, this could be a problem. If you went 10 or 20 years, this could be a problem, and you could end up with some big adjustments. Go ahead.
I remember a few years ago on the electric side, we made an adjustment to have a different fixed monthly charge for single dwellings versus multi. I don't think we've done that with Dominion currently.
We haven't.
Okay.
We haven't. But we are thinking about proposing something. Actually, that's a great segue. So I think this is kind of the data that shows how that shift to smaller customers is happening. It is happening, but it's happening kind of slowly. And we think we've got some safeguards in check, or to keep us in check. So one is there's caps on how much can be undercollected. There's not a cap on how much can be overcollected, but we can only undercollect, I want to say it's 5% of total D&G revenue. So if you got into a situation where you're adding a whole bunch of customers and it really was causing these huge undercollections, there would be a cap on how much you could collect. So that's one safeguard. Yeah. You have a comment, or are you just thinking?
Well, I'm just trying to understand the connection there. They do provide less revenue, but they also have a lot lower costs, don't they?
Yes. And that's that's the other thing. Every 3 years, everything gets reset. So this concern, if it were a problem, it really is a problem in that 3-year span in between rate cases, because what happens is you set everything based on the average customer, and then as you're adding new customers, if they're smaller, that's where you could have a problem. So that's the second safeguard, is we have this requirement due to the infrastructure tracker coming every 3 years, and so that every 3 years you're able to kind of reset things and clean that up. You have the cap. And then the third thing that we're going to be proposing in the next rate case is to split the GS class. So we've had this discussion many times. I actually think we finally got a pretty elegant solution. And we're proposing this in our Wyoming rate case right now. But we are going to propose to split the GS class by basic service fee, or by meter category. So everyone in a category 1 will be in one GS class. I don't know what you call it, GS small, GS.
That's what we did in Wyoming.
And then everybody in a category 2, 3, or 4 would be in a larger GS category. And so if we do that, and the way we're proposing it in Wyoming is we have a allowed revenue per customer for the small class and allowed revenue per customer for the large class. So you're actually creating more homogeneous classes. And so I think that also would help to take care of this worry that you're adding a whole bunch of smaller customers. Those smaller customers are getting included in the smaller group. And so that revenue discrepancy would not be as large. So those are some things we're thinking of. This is the last slide. I think we've gotten some really good feedback. So we'll definitely include everything we talked about. I guess this is your last chance. Is there anything else we've missed that people want to see us talk about or evaluate in the next general rate case? If not, I'll pass it to Austin, but wanted to give everybody a chance. And those on the phone will pause here for a moment although I'm guessing those on the phone probably don't have a dog in this fight.
No questions, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Before I start, I'm going to go back a slide and reserve the right to change how I split the GS class by the time I put testimony together. But that is what we proposed in Wyoming, kind of a dry run. I do want you to hand these out if you will. This issue gets a little technical, so I guess it's appropriate for a technical conference. So I'm happy to take questions as we're going. If I'm confusing anybody, sorry. But I'm happy to stop and answer any questions as we go. So we've kind of color coded a few things. That's why I'm handing out. This is one of the slides, but if it's something that you want to refer to as we're going through this, that might be good. There's really, and this is a snip out of the commission order, but we were ordered to provide additional information on different revenues. There were really two issues that kind of came up. One was the new core question about why are we showing an $87.8 million increase in our rate design tab, and other places we're talking about a $70.5 million increase. So what was the difference between those? And that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to talk about this UAE question about the depiction of current B&G revenues for the transportation classes and how it was inconsistent. So the new core one will take me a little bit. I don't think that the UAE one will be too difficult. I do think that these are good questions though, because they're, as you're digging into the model a little bit, you can see where there would be some confusion. So kudos to those of you who are digging through the model. Okay, so this is where we're looking at that slide. I'm going to walk you through what each of these are. I'm going to grab my copy too because it's confusing. So the first one is booked revenue. And when I'm talking about booked revenue, I'm talking about what was recorded in the financial statements historically. So when we're looking at anything that's blue, we're talking about a historical 12 months that ended in December 2021. We're using that mostly in the revenue requirement calculations, and it's kind of used as a starting point, and then we add adjustments to it to get to different numbers, such as average projected revenue. So this red one is going to be based off of what actually happened, and then we're adding to it. So the first bullet there is that we're using forecasted billing determinants. So now we're starting with the base, but now we're going to apply what is usage per customer going to be, what is how many customers will we have, those kinds of things in 2023. It's kind of a look at what the company would collect if no rate case was filed. Now I say
Just clarification, the 420 is a totally unadjusted number.
Correct.
No weather normalization or anything, just.
No, it's
it is weather normalized.
Is it weather normalized?
So it is what we booked as revenue. So it would be normalized. But everything else that's going forward would be based on normal weather as well. So it's still a good comparison between two. So I say we wouldn't file a rate case with this number, but we do include in that like future infrastructure replacement plan tracker filings. So there is some forecasted revenue in there. Another thing to consider with that is that it is before any class changes. So this again is kind of it's a projected thing in 2023 where we would be without a case. Now let's look at the green one, the revenue requirement, and this is what is calculated in the revenue requirement portion of the model. So it's taking the red number, and then it's adding a $70.5 million deficiency. it's forecasted revenue using proposed rates. It's the revenue the company would collect if the rate case was approved. Now that is the ultimate number that we are really concerned about. So that one is used for allocating that cost to all of the different customer classes. That is the cost that we are ultimately going to collect through rate design. So green is kind of an important number. Yellow is an interesting thing.
I have a question on the green. I apologize.
Go ahead.
And so the green includes your adjustment. It's red plus 70.5, right? So it includes your forecasted tracker filing, correct?
I'm nodding my head, yes, but I will say it out loud. Yes, that's correct.
And includes your
Thank you.
ROE.
And it includes our change in ROE. So this is as we filed it. This isn't what commission ordered or anything. This is just how we.
That's what we're
How to file
saying
it.
we need to run our system. That's how much money we need to collect in this rate case.
Right. Other questions on yellow? Or, sorry, green? Okay, yellow. And I don't know what the background is on this. This has been in our model for as long as I've been in the department. That's 14 years that we've been doing this. What we're doing with this is we're saying, and this is only used in the rate design tab. What we're saying is if we just used the new billing determinants, how much gas people are going to be using, which block rates are they going to be in, how much revenue would we have collected in 2023 without a rate case? So there's no forecasted tracker filings. It's just current rates, but with new billing determinants. And I think that this one is the one that has caused some confusion, because you're looking at this saying this is current revenue, but you could also look at red and say that's current revenue. So we'll talk about it a little bit. I'll walk you through where each of these is used in the model and what we're comparing. I'm seeing some hands or maybe some frustration. John, did you have something?
Well, I just want to make sure I understand it. Basically, this would be if the number that you would get in the 2023 if the commission just said, no, we're not
No.
approving anything.
Right.
Nothing's changing.
Right.
Okay.
Phil, did you have something?
No,
Okay.
just extending my arm.
Yeah.
Can move a little. It's sitting for too long.
So, give me the difference between the red and the yellow.
Yeah, so
Don't they both have the same billing determinants?
they are the same billing determinants. I would say the difference is going to be that
The
this
tracker.
one had some tracker. Because we know that even if we didn't file a rate case and we didn't, there was no increase in revenue, we know that we would get. We're reasonably certain that we would get that revenue.
Yeah, the other major difference, I think, particularly from this most recent rate case, is that last bullet about
Oh, yeah.
the inclusion of class changes.
Right.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so moving on. But keep this handy, because as I was going through it, I found myself referring back to this slide. So, it's a little bit washed out, but this is from the revenue requirement model. And you'll notice there that you've got that blue number, that 420, 621, 438. So that is, again, the historical 12 months, December from 2021. And you've also got this red number, which again is your average projected revenue for 2023. That's before any deficiency is added to it. Now we're going to move from revenue requirement now into cost of service. So this is our cost of service summary TS split tab. I've got in the black is going to show you what tabs we're looking at in the model. So we're going from revenue requirement and we're saying, okay, I'm going to start with my average projected revenue 2023. And that is, you can see it's kind of at the top. If you can see the line numbers, that's line 3. So this is kind of at the top, and then we're going to build on it all through the cost of service summary tab. So now here I am. I'm still at the top of cost of service summary tab with my red number, and then at the bottom you can see that it was
Green.
yellow here, but it's really green. That looks a little more green. So I'm going from my average projected revenue down to my revenue requirement. And the way that that's calculated is by taking the red number, adding in the deficiency, and that comes up with what the total revenue requirement would be. With me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I've kind of got my cost of service, and it's by class. We'll come back to by class here in a minute too. So now I'm starting at the same page. Bottom of the cost of service summary tab. I've got my 503,914, my green number, and I am going to carry that forward to my rate design because I want to set rates that will collect that total of 503. So everything on the right-hand side of this rate design tab is all used. This is kind of a bottom summary, but everything that's up above is where the rates are calculated by class. So it's going to say, how much revenue am I going to collect through a basic service fee for this many customers? How much am I going to collect through an admin fee? How much through firm demand charges? And then everything else is going to be calculated as a volumetric.
And Austin, to be clear, the cost of service summary is what the revenue increase of the revenues would be by class to achieve equalized rate of return.
That is correct. Yep, that's assuming
That's-
every
that
customer
ain't-
goes
we
to
haven't
full cost rates.
covered spread yet.
No.
We just say this is what everybody needs to pay if everybody's going to pay the same
Mhm.
rate of return.
Right. Good point. Here's where things kind of, I think, got confusing for people. Is on that same rate design tab is where that yellow number comes in. That 416,029,876. Now remember, this is calculated just by using current rates, but applying it to new billing determinants. So,
And new class.
and new classes, yep. So in something like let's say we've got somebody who was a TS customer before, and now they're going to be a TSL customer, TS large. We're comparing what rates they were paying as a TS customer and where that revenue would come in at, and comparing that to now the new structure as a TSL customer. I think there's some value to these comparisons because you can kind of look at it and say, okay, I was paying, I don't know, $1 per decatherm for this many blocks. And going forward, I'm going to be paying 20 cents for this many blocks. So I think there's some value to it, but I think that it's created some confusion because it's not, I don't know, it's more informational than calculational. Is that a word? Can I use that? It's informational. Watch for calculational in my next testimony. That'll be a fun one. If I can get it by Jen, it'll be in there. See, now it's all on you, Jen. Pressure's on. So that's kind of where those come up. So this is, again, just kind of a comparison. Again, these are a little bit washed out. So the slides, if you're looking at these later, you'll see a little bit different. So Nucor's ultimate question was, why are you showing an $87 million increase when your revenue requirement deficiency was only $70 million? And it's really just a comparison of different numbers. So this I think is a better comparison. So Nucor, they were comparing gold and green, come up with this $87 million difference, whereas what we were proposing is a comparison of red and green. Ultimately, you could compare either one, and the rates are going to be the exact same. The calculation of rates won't change because no matter what, we're collecting on this $503 million green number. But that's where kind of the confusion was at. We've had some people, as we've been digging into the model and kind of putting these slides together, we've had some people saying, well, maybe in the next one, we shouldn't show that right-hand side. We won't have a gold number. Remains to be seen, because it is just a comparison, but if it's confusing, maybe it's not worth having, but I kind of like having it. Just something that you can look at and see a comparison of where somebody was and where are they going to be. I think that is it on the new core question. I know new core is on the phone. I'll stop for questions from new core or from anyone who's here before I move on to the other one.
Yeah, I guess I'm still a little confused. I understand calculationally what you're saying, but in terms of evaluating what the actual increase is, right? It is closer to the $87 million, right? Because it is under current rate with the updated billing determinant, right? Then your expected revenue would be $416. So I guess I'm confused about why you're using the red number, not why you're using the gold number.
Yeah, and I guess you really could do it either way. The red number, I think, is a more accurate comparison of where rates would be without a rate case. So we would have, all of these. We would have the tracker revenue added into that number by the time 2023 rolled around without a rate case. So I think it's just a more, in my opinion, it's a more accurate look of what the rate case result would increase that total revenue.
So does the green number then include the same assumed adjustments for future tracker filings that the red number includes?
Yes. Yes.
Why not
If
just,
If I'm not mistaken, right, Dave, that does include, forecast.
Everything's bundled up, because it's gonna be the distribution costs above and beyond what we're gonna pull in for infrastructure replacement.
then why not change the
Road
model
expansion.
to just don't have the yellow number?
Could do.
Why do you need that yellow number?
You don't.
We don't.
But it's a.
Talking about it.
We're talking about it.
Why not just use the red number?
And I think, go back.
So some people prefer the yellow number.
So I think originally when this model was developed, we were using the yellow and the green to kind of come up with to do a kind of a spot check on class to see how much each class was going up. We don't do that in this page anymore. I think we do it in the cost of service tab now. So I think, I don't think we need it. We don't need it at all. But I think as the model's developed over time, I think we just kind of kept this data in here and now it's causing confusion, and so.
I mean, we could change that to include the red.
Or you could
numbers.
get rid of it altogether. I mean, it's not.
And just have the rate design tab be calculating rates.
Right.
Yeah. Commissioner?
I think that the current rates are instructive for, having the current rate is an instructive element when evaluating what the changes are going to be, right? I understand why the yellow's there. I think it's helpful when we're looking at okay, what is our impact going to be, right? And I think generally for any party, right? I think I need to think on this a little bit more.
So from UAE's perspective, we kind of like the yellow tab as well. Like that information is useful to us, particularly with having had this discussion about what it is, and probably
Maybe
you
just
guys probably
needs
do
better
more about that.
definitions and
And we talked about
explanation
that,
of what
too.
it is,
Yeah.
so that people don't get confused.
And that might be something that we change some labels in the model, and then we more clearly in testimony say what's what.
Yeah.
Commissioner Harvey, did you have
I think the discussion's answered mine, we're fine.
okay. Commissioner Clark?
So, if there's a statutory obligation to illustrate for a given customer the percentage change, the percentage increase in rates that your proposal is going to engender, are you going to use the yellow number and the green number, or the red number and the green number to honestly present that percentage change?
So that's a great question, because you would get a different result.
Yeah.
If you compared, these two numbers.
Yeah.
The way that we've done our typical bill comparison.
Yeah.
Is that we are using the rates that are in effect when we file and kind of calculating what it would be for a customer, and then comparing it to the result if the rate case were approved. So I guess that it would be more of a comparison between the yellow and the green.
Yeah.
In that case.
That's what I'm thinking, and that's I think the value of the yellow number, and maybe it's even, I'm trying to think through the disclosure statutes that regarding noticing of your rate increase, but you ought to think about what compliance with those requires.
That's
in terms of what number you're.
It's a really good recommendation. I kind of opened up the commission rules yesterday and was looking at if it said specifically which revenue to show, and it said that you have to be consistent with what you're showing in the revenue requirement. So if you're going to use a forecasted test period, then you have to show revenues that would be comparable to what historical would be. And so it's kind of what it says, but what I didn't not look at was the calculation of a change in customer. So I'll add that to my list. That's a good thing to bring up. Yvonne?
I just want to make sure that whatever definitions we use, whatever comprises revenues that you use in each model, you use the same definition for revenue requirement, cost of service, rate design, everything. In other words, it's all consistent. What goes into revenues, everything is consistent between the models. And it looks like maybe you do that based on the numbers squaring, but I just want to make sure that you confirm that for me.
Oh, I appreciate that. And it's funny because you listen to, I don't know if any of the rest of you have listened to yourself on a hearing, and you go, oh, that was
Try
awful.
not to.
Yeah. But like this question came up, in the hearing, and I was just going, you could tell I wanted to say, trust me, everything's working. But I didn't, use those words because it would be not good testimony. But it's a hard thing to explain, on the witness stand, and it almost does take some slides to walk through that and to show everybody what's what. So I actually really appreciate the opportunity to redeem myself from hearing testimony. Any other questions on this? I know Kelly's taken over the role as notes taker. Harvey?
Can I ask a question? Why do you not replace the red number with the with adjustments to get you to the yellow number in the revenue requirement portion of the model. Is there a rational reason why you don't do that, if that's really what you're saying current revenues
So I guess,
are going to be in the future
Yeah.
with the tracker?
and that thought came to my head as I was talking through this here today, is why not do away with the red number and just use the gold in everything else? And I think that they're just showing two different things. If we did away with the red number, I don't know that it would be a really fair look at what would happen absent a rate case. Because we do anticipate DNG revenue going up because of those trackers. So I think that that's a better, when you're trying to say what's your deficiency going to be in 2023, I think you need to look at it and say, there will be current rates plus some changes for these trackers. That will all be happening before 2023. So I think that's a good number to use to compare, to calculate that deficiency. Using the yellow number would make it a higher deficiency than what we would actually experience absent a rate case.
So maybe it's a different question, but why does the yellow number not include adjustments for future tracker filings? If the rationale for the red number is this is what would happen if we didn't have a rate case, which these tracker filings would happen anyway. Why do we remove that aspect from the yellow number? Because the yellow number is sort of a partway there. Like you're not getting any additional revenue through base rates, but you are getting things like class changes if they occur.
Mhm.
But why do we? But I guess I don't understand why we would take out the tracker part.
To go back, I think it has to do with, you can see the billing determinants are the exact same, right?
Yeah.
So I think the reason why is because when we go in for a generate case, all those tracker volumes and dollars get swept into base rates, and so this was originally designed to be an apples to apples comparison, base rates, or billing determinant to billing determinant. And yeah, really it's the trackers is kind of making that apples to apples comparison a little more tricky.
Is there a way? I mean, I don't intend to do this, but is there a way to add a line item that just says here's the tracker stuff that's not included in the billing determinants up above, so that it's closer to another apple, you know?
Yeah.
No, I like that idea.
Yeah.
You could maybe even add a column, and then you could have it all.
Yellow plus. New color.
Yeah, I think.
Another color.
Well, basically, your yellow existed before your infrastructure tracker.
Right.
And when you put the tracker into it, you just did it on this other side and came up with a separate number, which makes sense from the way the spreadsheet works.
But I just think
So I mean, one thing, I do think the column, and I think a yellow plus makes sense, but you may just need a flow chart that just says, here's exactly how we get, what things we add to get from blue to red, and blue to yellow, and yellow or red to green. Just kind of help it,
I think that would eliminate some of the confusion. I've just been writing timestamps of who said what, so I come back here and listen to this again. Great conversation. I was really worried that this would go over some heads and I wouldn't be explaining it well, and so I appreciate the conversation. It is helpful to hear what your thoughts are. Anything else before we move on?
Can I just ask a follow-up on Yvonne, just in terms of the consistency? My understanding is this is an integrated spreadsheet model.
It is.
And that whatever's formulas are going to calculate in the yellow and the red, that they're drawing from the same fields.
They are.
They're not going to separate databases to get them.
Self-contained.
It's self-contained. It's all
self-contained.
It's all in there.
And it all flows through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'll match up
Yeah, and if you change something in the revenue requirement calculation, you made an adjustment there, it would flow through the red, the green, and the yellow numbers. Blue wouldn't change because it's historical. Okay, if you want to come back, we'll come back. So this UAE issue, I think I only have one slide for it. So it was that DEU's depiction of current D&G revenue for the individual TSS, TSM, TSL, and TBF classes is inconsistent with the current revenue for these classes shown in its rate design. So here's where you've got some problems, is we didn't have booked revenue for those individual classes. We only had booked revenue for the TS class as a whole. Okay, so when you're looking at that blue number, and you've got to break that out now so that you can make comparisons of who is paying their, who's providing what rate of return by those classes, the data just didn't exist. So we had to kind of go back and do some math on how we did this. So we used the blue, we used the historical revenue, and we used the new billing determinants to kind of figure out how each of those classes of customers, how much revenue of the TS will be provided by each of those classes. I think it was reasonable. It was based on what actually happened in the past. Okay, so I thought I changed this to gold. I must not have saved the slide in all my color coding. Pretend this is gold. All of these squares are gold, because what UAE did is they said it makes more sense to use that gold number, that forecasted revenue at current rates. So it would make more sense to allocate that revenue using the gold calculations. As you can see, it's pretty close, and that's why in their testimony they said, you know, it doesn't make a difference, a big enough difference to really merit any fighting over it, but it was just their different way to do it. Now, it's reasonable, comes up with a pretty similar result. Going forward in the next rate case, we will have booked revenue for those classes, so we won't need to do any allocating. But we will need to do it if we split the GS class, because we won't have, you know, a GS small class or a GS large class booked revenue. So we'll have to do some allocation there. Commissioner Harvey?
But you do know which size meters customers have, right?
We do.
So if you did, which you've reserved the right to say you're not going to, but if you did what Kelly did, I mean, it wouldn't be a guess. You could go back and say, these are the people that had this size meter,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And that's exactly, I know Dave's paying a lot of attention back here in the corner, but that's exactly what Dave did, is he looked at which customers would qualify for the TS medium rate, and he made billing determinants for that group. And he looked at the TS large and he made billing determinants for that group. And so it was a pretty good, I thought it was a pretty good look at how to split it. Questions on that one? Now I'm hesitant to ask, did we answer your questions that you had in the rate case? Just turn around and say, nope, I didn't hear any.
Well, you answered the question, you just made new ones.
Yeah. That's fine. It's the model, I love it because it does do everything, but in fact, we've kind of been, a few of us have been looking at an Ohio case, and I'm like, can we just do it all in one? Because they've got one model for revenue requirement, one for cost of service, and one for rate design, and it'd be, yeah, if we go too much deeper on that, we might start changing it, but I think that is it for all of our slides. Any other questions?
Appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, truly, it is helpful. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and conclude the conference. Thank you everyone for coming.
Austin, I love that